My name is Alex Turner, and if you told me a year ago that I'd be second-guessing every detail in my marriage, I would have laughed. Or maybe just rolled my eyes. But lately, my life's felt more like one of those late-night drama threads people post about online. The kind where you start reading and can't look away, even as the train wreck unfolds. I've been married to Jordan for 6 years. We met in college, one of those classic, meant-to-be stories where everyone else sees you as the perfect couple. I believed it, too. We'd built a good life together. I'm not saying everything was sunshine and roses, but until recently, there wasn't a single moment where I doubted her. I was that guy. The one who rolled his eyes when buddies at work grumbled about their wives, the guy who thought that'll never be me. And then it was. The day it started, I wasn't looking for trouble. I'd just gotten home from work early. One of those rare days when the boss cuts everyone loose after lunch because the system was down. I remember thinking, cool, I'll surprise Jordan. Maybe catch up for once. Bring her a coffee. Be a good husband. She works from home, ever since her company went remote after COVID. I always knock, but this time her office door was open. I walked in quietly, balancing her favorite oat milk latte, and saw her hunched over the desk with her headphones on, totally absorbed in something on her screen. She didn't notice me right away, so I set the cup down, and that's when I saw it. A guest list, paper, not digital, with her company logo at the top. I was about to call her name when I noticed my own, Alex Turner, typed nice and neat, but struck through with blue ink. There was a scribble next to it, a new name written in Samuel Brooks. Samuel was someone I'd met once at their Christmas party. A friendly, younger guy in her department, always making jokes. Under normal circumstances, I probably wouldn't have thought twice, but there was something else. Right next to Jordan's name, someone had drawn a tiny heart. Not a regular bullet point, not a smiley, just a small, obvious heart, like a secret note in high school. The coffee almost slipped out of my hand. I told myself it was probably nothing, but my chest felt tight anyway. I left the coffee on her desk and backed out, suddenly not wanting her to see me looking. All afternoon, I replayed that little scene in my head. Was I overreacting? Was this just some dumb joke between coworkers? Maybe the coordinator really did mess up. But the longer I sat with it, the worse the feeling got. I'd never been cut from her guest list before. In fact, Jordan always wanted me at her work events, even when I felt awkward. By the time dinner rolled around, my nerves were frayed. Jordan was back to her usual self, chatty, upbeat, talking about her day. I tried to play it cool, but I know I must have seemed off. Hey, I finally blurted out. So, about that anniversary thing for your company. I saw a list on your desk. Did something change with the invitations? My name was crossed out. The look on her face was like someone flipped a switch. For a split second, she froze just long enough for me to notice. Then, she let out this high-pitched laugh, the kind you use when you trip in public and try to play it off. Oh my God, you saw that? Ignore it. Seriously, the event coordinator's a mess. She keeps mixing up names. You know how these corporate things go. Invitations aren't even finalized. She brushed it off with another laugh and got up, coming around the table to hug me from behind. Her arms felt warm, familiar, but my mind was racing. You'll get a real invite soon, she promised, her voice softer. Promise. Maybe if I hadn't seen that little heart, I would have let it go. But I couldn't. The rest of the night, I watched her a little more closely. How she scrolled through her phone at dinner, how she laughed at something she read, how she kept glancing at her notifications. I didn't want to be that guy, the suspicious husband, but suddenly, every little detail felt suspicious. Later, after she'd gone upstairs to shower, I walked back to her office. The guest list was still there, but now it was buried under a stack of other papers, almost like she didn't want it to be seen. I stood there for a minute, looking at my name, the blue strike through it, the little heart, and I felt something shift inside me. It was small, but it was real, the first splinter of doubt. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. My mind kept going back to that moment in her office. Jordan had never given me a reason not to trust her, but I couldn't shake the image. I kept replaying our conversation at dinner, the way her laugh had sounded just a little off, how she'd hugged me instead of really answering my question. I tried to remember if I'd seen her act like this before. Had there been other signs I'd missed? Was I just being paranoid? Or was this the first crack in something I'd always thought was unbreakable? I must have drifted off eventually, because I woke up hours later with a start. Jordan was sleeping next to me, her breathing steady and calm. I watched her for a minute, wondering if she could tell my whole world had shifted, even just a little. Wondering if she even noticed I was there. The next morning, she was her usual self, making coffee, humming as she got ready for another day of Zoom meetings. But I couldn't get the image of that list out of my mind. It hovered in the background, coloring everything she said. I tried to shake it off. I told myself I was being stupid. That's what she'd always said about other couples with trust issues. That she couldn't imagine hiding anything from the person you love. That honesty was the one thing that could always be counted on, no matter what. But from that moment on, I started seeing things differently. I started listening for the hesitation in her voice, watching for the way she'd glance away if I asked a direct question. It felt like a small betrayal, even if I didn't have all the facts yet. That was the day I realized the life I thought I had might not be as solid as I'd believed. And it all started with a name, crossed out in blue ink, and a tiny, careless heart. It's funny how, when you look back, you start to see patterns you never noticed in the moment. Like connecting dots on a page that always seemed blank, until suddenly, the outline's right there, clear as day. After the guest list incident, it was like I started seeing my marriage through a different lens. It wasn't just the little heart or the name swap that bothered me anymore. Suddenly, all these moments from the past few months started replaying in my head, and I realized how much I'd brushed aside. I remembered how Jordan's work schedule had gotten weird. She used to shut her laptop at 5:30, pour herself a glass of wine, and flop next to me on the couch, kicking her feet into my lap and scrolling through Netflix for the 100th time. But lately, she'd been working late. Like, really late. Her company had always been demanding, but the after-hours emails, the urgent client calls, the last-minute presentations on a Saturday night, felt over the top, even for her. I tried to be supportive. I'd make dinner, wait up for her, even heat up her plate when she got home hours after I expected her. She'd always kiss me on the cheek, thank me for understanding, and promise things would slow down soon, but they never did. Then there were the girls' nights. Jordan's always had a close group of friends, but they'd mostly hang out at our place or go out for the occasional brunch. Now, she was out almost every week, sometimes more, always somewhere new, some bar or restaurant I'd never heard of. And every time I offered to drop her off or pick her up, she'd say, "No, babe, don't worry, it's just us girls. Besides, it'll be late." The weirdest part? I never met up with them. She stopped inviting me to join at the end of the night, even just to say hi. I told myself it was nothing, that she needed her space, but it was hard not to notice the change. Around the same time, she started getting really into her appearance. Not that she ever let herself go. Jordan's always cared about looking sharp, but this was on another level. She started buying new outfits, clothes that were a little trendier, a little bolder. She joined a new gym, went to a different salon for her hair, and talked about reinventing herself, like it was some sort of self-care trend. One Saturday, I came downstairs and found her in the kitchen, mixing up a protein shake. She was in new workout gear, her hair up, makeup done, even though she just finished at the gym. I joked, "You're starting to make me look bad." And she just smiled, barely meeting my eyes. It's just time for a change, you know? Even her social media changed. I noticed she'd stopped posting pictures of us together. For years, she'd post random snaps *TS, Sunday morning coffee, date nights, even our anniversary trips. Lately, all her posts were solo. A new smoothie place, her in gym gear, *TS of her workspace, sunsets with inspirational quotes. It's like I'd been edited out, replaced by a new and improved Jordan. I kept telling myself it was a phase. Work stress, midlife stuff. But deep down, I knew it was something else. Something I didn't want to put a name to. I started noticing smaller things, too. The way her phone was always face down, or suddenly set to do not disturb after dinner. If it buzzed, she'd casually grab it, but her thumbs would move faster than normal, and she never let the screen face me. Sometimes she'd get a message, glance at it, then put her phone away with this tiny, guilty smile. One night, while she was in the shower, I glanced at her phone on the nightstand. I wasn't going to look through it, honestly, that's never been my style, but I did notice the wallpaper had changed. It was a picture of a sunrise over the city, not the goofy photo of us at the beach she'd used for years. No more notifications popped up on the lock screen either. Just one new message or email received. Like she'd gone out of her way to hide things. She also stopped telling me about her day. That used to be our thing, trading stories about annoying coworkers, crazy clients, office gossip. But lately, whenever I asked how work was, she'd just shrug and say, nothing much to report. Same old, same old. Or worse, she'd flip the conversation back to me. How was your day, Alex? Like she was dodging the question. I started to feel like a stranger in my own house. She'd stay late at the office, sometimes not coming home until midnight. If I texted her to check in, she'd respond hours later, sorry, busy night. Love you. Always upbeat, always casual. But the distance was there, growing wider with every unanswered question and every excuse. It got to the point where I started doubting myself. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe it was just the stress of her job, the world getting back to normal after the pandemic. Maybe I was the one changing, not her. I wanted to believe that. But the thing that kept gnawing at me more than anything was the way she looked at me, or really didn't. Before, even when we fought, she'd meet my eyes, argue, laugh, or cry with me. Now, it was like she was always somewhere else in her head, always thinking of something I couldn't see. I even started to notice the way Samuel's name popped up more and more in her stories. She'd mention him in passing, Sam helped me out with that project, or Samuel came through big time with the pitch. I'd joke, you two should get matching capes, trying to keep it light, but her response was always a little too sharp, too defensive. That's when I knew I couldn't keep brushing things under the rug. It all looked like a string of coincidences, but the feeling of distance kept growing. Every time I tried to get close, it felt like she slipped further away. I'd always trusted Jordan completely. But now, for the first time in our marriage, I started to wonder if maybe I shouldn't. The company anniversary came up faster than I expected, and honestly, I'd almost convinced myself that everything was fine. Maybe Jordan really did need more time for herself. Maybe I'd been reading too much into things. I tried to play the supportive husband, tried to keep my doubts to myself, but the unease never really left. The night of the event, Jordan was moving around the house like a whirlwind. She'd picked out a new dress, fancier than anything I'd seen her wear in months, and spent almost an hour getting ready. I told her she looked amazing, and she smiled, distant, distracted, then said she'd have to get there early to help set up. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and promised to text when things wrapped up. I didn't want to make a scene, so I played along. Have fun, I said, trying to sound normal. Don't wait up, she said, slinging her purse over her shoulder. It'll be late. Maybe really late, I might even crash at Tess's if we go out after. I nodded, heart heavy. It felt like the kind of thing you say when you're already halfway out the door. She left. I watched her drive away, standing at the window a little too long. The streetlights flickered on, washing everything in this yellow haze that made the night feel even emptier. I sat down, turned on the TV, tried to distract myself. But my mind kept circling back to that guest list, to Samuel's name, to the way Jordan had been so quick to shut down any questions. About an hour later, I realized I couldn't just sit there. Not anymore. It wasn't just curiosity, I needed to know the truth, whatever it was. I grabbed my keys and drove to the event space downtown, telling myself I'd just say hi, maybe surprise her. Maybe I'd find her laughing with her coworkers and realize I was just being ridiculous. But when I got there, something felt off immediately. There were people inside, but the crowd was smaller than I expected, and when I scanned the room, Jordan wasn't anywhere in sight. I wandered around, making small talk with a few people I vaguely recognized, but nobody mentioned seeing her arrive. I texted her, hey, made it to the event. Where are you? But there was no response. 10 minutes passed. 20. I finally gave up and decided to head home. I was halfway back to the house when I noticed a car parked in our driveway, a gray sedan, not ours. It was a model I'd seen before, but couldn't place until I remembered Samuel from the office, the same car he'd driven to their holiday party last year. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I parked on the street and walked up quietly, my heart pounding so hard I thought I could hear it echo in my ears. The house was dark except for the upstairs bedroom window, our bedroom. The light was on, shades half closed. I let myself in quietly, not wanting to announce my presence. The air inside felt strange, tense, almost charged. I crept up the stairs, every step louder in my mind than it probably was in real life. As I got closer to our bedroom, I heard voices muffled but unmistakable. One was Jordan's, her laugh, light and free in a way I hadn't heard in months. The other voice was deeper, a little awkward. Samuel. I froze outside the door. There was no mistaking it. Their voices, their laughter, Jordan saying something too low for me to catch, Samuel responding with a joke. I stood there, hands shaking, listening to the two of them in the room I used to think of as the safest place in my world. I didn't burst in. I didn't say a word. I just listened, numb, as every excuse and explanation Jordan had ever given me unraveled all at once. I realized I'd been chasing shadows, but the truth was right in front of me, louder than anything else. I don't know how long I stood there, 10 minutes, maybe more, before I finally turned and walked back down the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. I left the house quietly, got back in my car, and drove. I didn't know where I was going, I just needed to get away. I ended up parked in an empty grocery store lot, staring at the dashboard as everything caught up to me. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt, it was the realization that I'd been trying so hard to believe her, to trust her, when she'd stopped giving me reasons to do so a long time ago. After a while, I texted her, "Hope you're having a good night. I'll see you tomorrow." I don't know why I did it. Maybe to see if she'd lie. Maybe because I needed one last piece of proof that the person I loved was really gone. She didn't respond until hours later. "Sorry babe, busy night. Love you." I stared at that message until my phone screen went dark. That was the night everything changed. The night I finally stopped making excuses. The night all her explanations ended. The next morning, I woke up in my car. I hadn't even realized I'd fallen asleep, but the sunrise had started to color the sky pink and orange, and there was condensation on the windshield. For a moment, I forgot where I was, what had happened, and then it all came back in a rush, the party, the car in the driveway, the laughter upstairs. I drove home in a fog. I told myself maybe they'd both be gone, maybe I wouldn't have to face it yet. But as I walked in, I heard Jordan in the kitchen. She was moving around, making coffee like nothing had happened, like it was any other Saturday morning. There was no sign of Samuel's car. It was just her humming along to a playlist she always used on lazy weekends. She turned as I came in, and for a second I almost convinced myself that I'd imagined the whole thing. But then I saw the tightness around her eyes, the way she didn't quite look at me when she said, "Morning." "Morning," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. I waited for her to say something more, maybe an apology, maybe an explanation, even just a hint that she knew I was hurting. But she didn't. She poured me a cup of coffee and slid it across the counter, then busied herself with her phone. We sat in silence for a long time. My mind kept replaying what I'd heard the night before. I tried to catch her eye to see if there was any sign of guilt, but she wouldn't meet my gaze. Finally, I asked, as directly as I could, "Did you see Samuel last night?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she kept staring at her phone, scrolling with her thumb like she was reading something incredibly important. Then she set the phone down with a little too much force and said, "I'm tired of your suspicions, Alex. Honestly, it's exhausting. If you can't trust me, maybe you should focus on yourself for a while." Her voice was sharp, her words clipped, so different from the woman I'd known for 6 years. I almost didn't recognize her. I wanted to yell, to demand the truth, but something stopped me. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was the sense that any confrontation would just make her dig in deeper. I looked at her and realized that the woman I loved was slipping away from me, day by day, lie by lie. I noticed more changes after that. Her phone was always on silent, never buzzing with notifications anymore. She started keeping it with her at all times, even taking it into the bathroom, which she'd never done before. I tried to log into our shared streaming account one evening and realized the password had changed. When I asked her about it, she just shrugged. "Oh, IT must have forced a reset," she said, barely looking up from her laptop. It was like she was systematically locking me out of her life. She started spending even more time away from home. Sometimes she'd say she was working late, sometimes she'd just tell me she was meeting a friend and wouldn't be back until late. Other times, she wouldn't bother to explain it all, just a brief text, hours after she'd left, "Don't wait up. Busy night." The isolation set in fast. Our home became a place where we only crossed paths in the hallway, sharing a few mumbled words over coffee or takeout containers. The easy laughter, the inside jokes, the warmth, all of it vanished, replaced by a cold politeness that stung more than any argument. I started to feel invisible. Even when we were in the same room, it was like I didn't exist. She'd walk past me, eyes on her phone, barely acknowledging me. If I tried to talk about anything real, our relationship, what was happening between us, she'd shut it down instantly. "Not now, Alex. I'm tired." Or, "I can't do this with you tonight." The walls of our house felt like they were closing in. I found myself retreating to the guest room more and more just to have some space where I could breathe. I'd lie awake at night, listening to her move around in the bedroom down the hall, wondering if she was texting him, if she was planning her next lie, if she ever thought about what we'd built together. I started to lose track of time. Days blurred together. Friends called and I ignored them, not wanting to explain why I sounded hollow. My family reached out and I made excuses. I felt ashamed, stupid for not seeing it sooner, stupid for still hoping she'd tell me the truth. Sometimes I'd see her looking at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention, this guarded, almost defensive expression. Like she was waiting for me to accuse her or for the other shoe to drop. But she never offered anything. She just kept building her walls higher, shutting me out. It was clear whatever we'd had was gone. And the saddest part was that she didn't even seem to care. It was a Tuesday night and the house felt emptier than usual. Jordan was working late again, though by now that phrase barely meant anything. I didn't even ask her when she'd be home. The routines we used to share, waiting up for each other, quick texts to say goodnight, the comfort of knowing when the other would walk through the door, all of that had disappeared. The TV was on, but I wasn't watching. I sat at the kitchen table, spinning my wedding ring on the wood, trying to remember what it felt like to trust her. At some point, I realized her laptop was open on the kitchen counter. Normally, Jordan was religious about logging out and locking it, one of those habits she developed after a scare with identity theft. But tonight, she must have been in a rush. I know how it sounds. I didn't want to be the kind of person who snoops, who checks up on their spouse like a suspicious parent with a sneaky teenager. But I couldn't help myself. The urge to know was stronger than the guilt, stronger than my pride. I stood up and walked over to the laptop, telling myself I'd just close the lid and go to bed. But the screen was still lit, her messenger app open and glowing with a new notification. There it was. A message at the top of the screen from Samuel Brooks. Thanks for last night, I can't stop thinking about you. For a second, my mind blanked. I stared at those words, unable to breathe, every cell in my body burning with a mixture of relief and heartbreak. Relief, because finally, the fog of doubt and denial was gone. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. Heartbreak, because seeing it in writing, seeing the truth spelled out so casually, hurt more than I ever imagined it could. Without thinking, I snapped a screenshot. My hands were shaking as I saved it to a flash drive, some small part of me wanting to keep a record in case I needed proof later, for lawyers, for closure, for myself. I didn't look any deeper. I didn't scroll through the conversation or search for more. I had enough. That was it. The last piece of the puzzle. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty kitchen. It was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming and the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. The house felt colder, unfamiliar, a place I no longer recognized. I went upstairs and packed a bag. I didn't take much, just the essentials, some clothes, my laptop, my toothbrush. I wrote a short note on a scrap of paper and left it on the kitchen table. When you crossed my name off the guest list, you already made your choice. I'm just leaving first. I booked an Airbnb across town. The place was small, just a converted basement studio, but it was quiet and nobody there looked at me like they expected answers. I lay on the unfamiliar mattress that night, staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange calm settle over me. The storm was finally over. There was nothing left to fight for. The next morning, my phone buzzed before I'd even had coffee. Jordan. First it was calls, then texts, then voicemails. At first she was angry, demanding explanations, asking why I was abandoning her, why I'd left without a word. Then her messages turned frantic, asking me to come home, to talk like adults, to fix this. Then finally she begged. She accused me of being dramatic, of betraying her by snooping and spying. She called me cold, unfeeling, heartless. Then, minutes later, she'd text again saying she missed me, asking if we could talk, swearing she'd explain everything if I just came home. Sometimes she'd apologize, sometimes she'd blame me, but it always circled back to her needs. I read every message, but I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I'd given her 100 chances to come clean, and she'd lied every time. Now, with nothing left between us but silence, I finally felt like I could breathe again. I started making plans to get my own place. I called a lawyer, set up a meeting for the following week. I didn't tell anyone what had happened, not yet. It was all too raw, too fresh, like a wound I had to protect from the world. At night, I'd scroll through our old photos on my phone, vacations, birthdays, the time we painted the kitchen and ended up laughing with blue streaks in our hair. I couldn't reconcile those memories with the reality of what my marriage had become. It was like looking at someone else's life. The only thing that gave me comfort was the certainty that I'd finally stopped lying to myself. I left Jordan behind the same way she'd left me, quietly, without a scene, just a note and a door softly closed. I thought about what it would feel like to never see her again, to delete her number, to erase all the plans we'd made. It hurt, but it also felt like the only honest thing I'd done in a long time. I changed jobs a few months later, took a position in another city, one with better hours, new faces, no reminders of what I'd lost. The move felt good, like a reset button on a life that had grown stale and anxious. I made new friends. I learned how to enjoy my own company. I learned that loneliness and peace can look pretty similar from a distance, but only one gives you room to grow. Sometimes I still think about Jordan. Sometimes I even miss her, or at least the version of her I used to know. But those feelings don't hurt the way they used to. They don't control me. I know now that losing her wasn't the end of my story, it was just the end of a chapter. Maybe one day when I've fully moved on, I'll look back and be grateful for the lessons this all taught me. For now, I'm just grateful to feel like myself again. Jordan still messages me every now and then, but I don't read them anymore. I let them sit unread like old invitations with my name crossed out. When she chose to erase me from her life, she made her decision. I'm just making mine, one day at a time. And this time, for the first time in a long while, it finally feels like the right choice.